This is Comic Picks by the Glick.
Hey, I'm your host, Jason Glick.
Hey, Jason.
Yes. Yes, I still am. Okay. Anyway, it's I can't tell you exactly what possessed me to drag up this week's topic, but I don't know, it's just like I've been thinking about it for a while. But it's like, hey, it's been a while since I've brought up Garth Ennis for any reason. Well, yeah, in the podcast anyway, but I still talk about his stuff regularly in the posts anyway. But like one of the things that Ennis keeps coming back to over and over again are war stories. Because apparently he was raised on World War II, on World War II comics from Britain, and that kind of stuff has become ingrained in his psyche.
Yeah.
Now, on one hand, and he keeps finding some ways to tell these stories like over and over again in the series that he's done. He's done it in his run on Hellblazer. He did it in Preacher. I don't know, he didn't specifically do it in Hitman, but like that spirit was still there. I mean, when you get Tommy and his buddies finding a German Tiger tank and then using it to depose a South African dictator, then yeah, it's like that's your World War II spirit right there. But the thing is, like Ennis, man has a real soft spot for like telling stories just about just like the regular grunts and like soldiers in World War II. More than anything else, and he just keeps bringing that back, like time and time again. His most in-depth examination is probably in the 8 issues of War Story that he did for Vertigo, and that's he did it's Villain War Story Volume 1 and 2, and you get like lots of interesting perspectives, like from the story of a German commander of a German Tiger tank and his crew, who his name's Johann, and he did some very bad things in war, and he was determined to just basically find a way to save his crew and then die at the end to atone for all he's done. The story of what are called the D-Day Dodgers, essentially like the British forces who were fighting in Italy at the time the D-Day was going on. These people were giving their all to fight the German menace in southern Italy. All the eyes of the world were on the D-Day invasion of times. That's the big photo. That's the big money shot story. If you think, then you also get Screaming Eagles, which is a story of a American crew towards the end of the war operation in Europe, who are just like Germans in retreat, and they just been screwed over by their leaders at some point, and they're ordered to scope out this one German villa for a conference, and then they just figured, hey, you know what? We're just gonna use this to get the R&R we've always deserved throughout this trip. Then also the story of Nightingale, a convoy escort in the Arctic, who is on one level like they're kind of cursed because they were ordered to desert to break off from their escort, and they were the only people to make it back. And so it's the story. Eventually, the story of their redemption and subsequent death. The second volume focuses on the story of the Reavers, a group of British commandos who were just fighting the Germans in the desert, and the story of one of their leaders who just has so much fun fighting them that he doesn't want to give up this job at all. The story of J for Jenny, a group of British bombers who were fighting the Germans, and one guy who just he realizes that, hey, you know what, we've the Germans are bastards, and but if we keep doing this stuff to them, then we're no better than they are. And then the other guy who just basically realizes that, hey, his family was killed, he just wants to bomb them into oblivion. And then
so more of a revenge tale, right?
Yes it is. But let's see, what's the third one? Yes, the third story being Condors, which is probably the best of the stories, which basically has its set up sounds like a joke. You've got a German pilot, an Irish commando, a British soldier, and a Spanish fighter, all thrust into a pit together to fight this one pretty brutal battle in the Spanish Civil War, and you get to hear their different perspectives, like the Germans' thoughts on how the post World War I era was just like a horrible time for Germany, and how Hitler brought Hitler brought them back to being respectable, but he doesn't care because he doesn't care about the politics. Germany just allows him to fly. The British guy who embraces socialism because it basically he feels it allows everyone to be equal, and this is the way of the future. The Irishman, who is in some ways basically a lunatic because he's basically like because he embraces fascism and its fight against Britain's tyranny over Ireland, and also the Spanish guy who's basically the most even-headed of the lot, who reasons that they're all idiots in the sense that he was at the Battle of Guernica, which renowned for its brutality, and he just basically says that like all the stuff you talk about, all these justifications you give for fighting war, it's all just bullshit. It's like none of this means anything. It's the strongest of the stories. And then you've also got the end story, Archangel, which basically tells the story of Camship. It's basically it's story. This one guy, like kind of like a not too bright British pilot who basically is basically after screwing up royally in this one battle, is basically sent to become the fighter pilot in this one campship, which basically you're a pilot in a plane that is launched from a freighter, and you're basically sent out to fight the German bombers that are being sent at them, and it's quite insane when you say this when you hear this, and it's kind of like you just look at this guy and it's like, oh god, this is awful, but it's played for really entertaining light black comedy, and it's entertainment. But overall, both of these volumes of war stories are really well done, because Ennis. If there's one thing, it's because Ennis loves bringing out his standard tropes of characters, like the guy who can't stop fighting because he loves killing too much.
Right.
The moral character who realizes what they're doing is wrong, even in the face of insurmountable horror.
Right.
Or the standard by the book kind of guy who wants to follow the rules but is kind of also just he's he wants to follow rules and he's either a complete idiot because of it, or he's actually surprisingly good at his job in spite of it. And you see a lot of Ennis's standard tropes brought out in these stories. I've read these stories. Ennis is kind of constitutionally incapable of writing a story that kind of directly celebrates or makes or glamorizes these kind of things. He basically does a great job of showing you stories of war as they are, how it's basically a great toll on the psyches of all the people involved, and just how even if these people do good things, they're often done either in the face of unsurmountable horror or in spite of the fact that the commanding officers are complete idiots and are just more often than not just setting them out to die. Yeah, but Ennis he's war story is probably one of the purest examples of his stuff. He's also done a good job of nailing on this war story stuff to a lot of other familiar titles. Probably best example of this is when he's trying to stuff for Marvel, because he's done stuff because when it comes to his Marvel stuff, he can't actually do a direct war story because you actually have to bring in one of their characters in order to pull this off.
Right.
Yeah, so basically the most prominent examples being the Punisher and Nick Fury. Now I probably talked about this.
Easiest example.
Yes. Now I probably talked about this briefly on my Punisher podcast over a year ago, but Punisher Born is one of the few times Ennis is entered out of World War II and into Vietnam. Probably the only time I can remember off the top of my head is when he did the story of Jesse Custer's dad in Preacher. But Punisher Born is a story of Frank Castle and him and his story, basically how he got a taste for killing. Basically found out he was really good at that, but it's is this something he wanted to do for the rest of his life, or was he going to he wanted to commit to doing this for the rest of his life, or was he just gonna let the let the war in Vietnam stop him.
It's interesting. He fit him into his character profiles.
Yeah, it's like it actually is like a good story about Vietnam because it also tells you story. It's one other character who also who also has a very optimistic perspective of America, and if it views that Vietnam as just like a big misstep in their thing, but he just wants to like just survive things, get it out, and then we can just get back to being the great country that we are. Right. And he just this huge wake up call between his African American friend who's sucked into the bad side of Vietnam, and also Frank Castle's perspective. And it's just like just punishing all the bad people who are involved in this, no matter what they are.
Right.
It's a good story, and highly recommend for like fans of Punisher or just like war stories in general. Mm-hmm. Now the other short major World War II stories he's done, basically is revolves around Nick Fury. Keep in mind that this is delving into bad Marvel continuity backwaters. Yeah.
This sounds like it already off the top.
Yeah, this version of Fury they're talking about is basically Ennis's version of Fury.
Right.
Which is basically not the Nick Fury that we know and love from the regular Marvel universe, but basically Ennis is a misogynistic soldier who can't give up fighting and killing the bad guys from his original Fury miniseries that was launched when the Marvel's Max Mature Readers imprint was launched a couple of years back. Yeah, this Fury basically shows sort of him basically starting out in World War II, finding out that hey, you know what? Despite what everyone tells us about how great the American war machine is, we're still second banana when it comes to fighting the Germans. And him finding that out the hard way in the first two issues, and then eventually teaming up with these British commandos to take out this one German commander who is said to be on his way to assassinate Hitler and bring an end to World War II. But then they find out that that's not quite the case. It's in fact this guy is actually has a much stronger sense of duty, and that it's everything that's going on is much worse than it's set up to be. I mean, it's like Marvel's characters they're well suited for telling certain stories that you can nail on to them. Like with Daredevil, you can tell a good crime story about him because he's built for that thing. Fury, he's good for telling World War II stories, and Ennis exploits that well in Fury Peacemaker. So, I mean, it's not like awe-inspiring story by any means, but it's pretty good if you like Ennis's stuff.
Gotcha.
Another story that he's done that involves those characters also built for telling World War II stories is Battler Britain. This is Britain is apparently a character who's that had a long history in Britain, and apparently he was one of the characters that Ennis grew up on, and apparently when he got the chance to write him for DC's Wildstorm imprint, he apparently jumped at the chance. He told a really interesting five story tale that on one hand Britain is basically your standard character. He's really good at he's basically a fighter pilot, and he's really good at his job. But Ennis also uses a really good story as a vehicle to tell a story of intercontinental cooperation between the Americans and the British during World War II. Because this takes us around the time when the Americans were getting into World War II, and Britain's group is attached to an American outfit in Northern Africa in order to teach them the techniques of fighting the German aircraft.
Right.
And it's pretty interesting. You got these Americans who generally don't like to be told what to do, and these British guys they've had years to learn the hard way of fighting Germans. Mm-hmm. And it's a really good story of how these groups eventually learn to work together. In fact, the only issue I have is is Ennis's treatment of the American commander, who, well, I don't know, to Ennis's credit, he treats the American commander as kind of like a joke in the first couple issues, but then he realizes that it's got more mileage in having him eventually start to warm to Britain's style and eventually start to learn from him. But it comes off as just Ennis having a laugh at Americans for the most part. To be honest, for the most part, Americans generally don't come off a lot very well in a lot of his war comics because
Interesting.
yeah, mainly because I think it's just because they were we were the people who came lately to the World War II theater.
We had we had less to invest in it.
Yeah.
Probably in his opinion, it's like, oh, we've been fighting for our lives here.
Yeah, and then you guys show up and are about to tell us how it's done. Yeah, sure.
Right.
That's one of the things that happens, and also that's also exploded to comedic effect, and what I think is one of his. It's not necessarily one of his. I can't quite say it's a great war story, because it's basically taking the piss out of the out of all the stuff he's talked about. There's one of his first World War II stories was two series called Adventures of the Rifle Brigade. This is these are 2 3-issue miniseries from DC's Vertigo imprint. They basically ruthlessly mock the conventions of every British war comic ever created. I mean, you've got the stoic, sort of square-jawed British general who's British lieutenant who's leading the rifle brigade into combat against insurmountable odds. You got his soft lieutenant who might be gay, but isn't quite. And you've got they got his supporting characters who are just like Hank the Yank, who's he's the American guy who's fighting for them. You got Corporal Geezer, who's the lower class guy who's always telling people you're out of order, and also their sergeant who's just this really big fat guy who's just he's just kind of scaring the hell, just beat the crap out of just about anyone. And these 2 issues are collected in one trade. These 3-issue stories are collected in one trade paperback. It's a lot of fun. And even if you've never read any of these kind of World War II stories, you'll read this and you think God, man, it's just a spot on parody of just about every war story you've ever read. It's a lot of fun. It's one of Ennis's most compulsively rereadable stories, just because he nails his humor in situations for a lot of these characters, especially since you've got them going up against really outlandish characters like Gerda Gash, the German German SS leader who's out to torture their secrets out of them, and Jaeger X, who are the scary SS commandos who are out, who are just dropped on their plane in order to take out the rifle brigade, and also Marilyn Smith, the American operative who uses the whip and hates badgers, who is trying to intercepts the rifle in their attempt to obtain Hitler's missing testicle, which is said to contain the powers to allow any army to victory in Europe. So it's great fun, and like I said, it's kind of it's set out to mock all the conventions of the stories that Ennis writes about, but it's a lot of fun. But Ennis has also come back to World War II recently in a series for Dynamite Publishing called Battlefields. Now, I want to tell you about these stories mainly because I don't want you to make the same mistake I read and buy these trade paperbacks one by one as I did. Because recently they've announced that there's a nice hardcover edition that collects all 3 of these stories. Now, these 3 stories are basically the Night Witches, which tells the story of these female Russian fighter pilots who were basically assigned to fight the Germans. And let me tell you, when you hear about Russians fighting the Germans in Garth Ennis comics, dude, it's you just want to get the fuck out of the way, because Germans, as bad as the Germans are, the Russians, after they've after the Germans have done everything to them, the Russians come back and then are just even worse. And then you also get the story of Dear Billy, which is one of Ennis's. Actually, I think this is probably his only foray into the Pacific theater of combat, because it shows the story of a woman who was assaulted, part of a group that was assaulted by the Japanese, saved from certain death by the time of some paramedics, and then forced to live out the rest of the war with the knowledge of what was done to her. And while she takes solace in this one British pilot who was also assaulted by the Japanese, she eventually she actually can't live with things when she finds out that, hey, the war is going to end, and we've got to actually work with the Japanese in order to, like, instead of like fighting them and killing them like the bastards they are in this combat. It's a great story, and one of the sadly, and also probably one of the most depressing ones, just because of the way it ends, but still well worth reading. The only misfire, probably one of the rarest misfires in Ennis's canon, actually. Well, not quite a misfire, but I kind of expect better from him based on how he's done these things. But is the third Battlefield story, the Tankies. In this one, well, Ennis, a lot of other stories, Ennis actually has a good point to these. Like you're telling like a nice story, like from point A to point B. The Tankies seems to be his attempt to actually tell a like as it happens type story. Like instead of actually just like setting up a story with a clear objective, it's just like a what's going on in these characters' lives, like what's everything that's happening at the same time. Like you have, it's essentially the story of this British tank group that's settled with the new commander who speaks with an unintelligible accent, and their attempts to try and survive in the face of like superior firepower and tactics. But then it also like tells the story of like the British commanders, the grunts, just about everyone that's going on like in the post D-Day theater of war, and it feels very unfocused. I mean, like you're able to like hold on to like some sense of like narrative by focusing on the titular Tankies themselves, but it just doesn't come together the way a lot of his best stuff does. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, I respect him for trying to do something new, but this, I don't know. Like I said, it's more of a. I feel he's done better, and maybe he'll do better since, because like I've heard that there's a new series of Battlefields stories coming out next year, which will probably include a sequel to the Tankies, but we'll see how it goes from there. But generally, overall, what I'm trying to say here is that more often than not, like when Garth Ennis is like talking specifically about war, even if he's taking like a Marvel character to nail on a World War II story or even a World War I story too, it's like it's generally worth reading about. Because like, hey, it's like he's not about just like glamorizing service. He's about telling you like how things actually were at the time, and that's something that's always worth hearing about. Okay, so that's it. So until next time, catch you later.
All right, see you next time.